The moment I sat down in my grandson's expensive gaming chair, his Livestream chat exploded with laughter. "Grandma's gonna play," one message read. "She probably thinks the controller is a TV remote," another one chimed in. My grandson Leo just stared at me, his face pale with pure humiliation. He is a famous streamer, and 50,000 people were watching his clueless grandma embarrass him live. What Leo didn't know, and what his fans were about to discover, was my secret. He had been failing to beat that impossible boss for a week. But I knew its patterns. I knew every line of its code, because 40 years ago, I was the one who wrote it. The yelling from my grandson's room was loud enough to shake the wall. I paused in the hallway, holding a glass of water. Another crash, the sound of a heavy plastic controller hitting the floor, was followed by a stream of words I preferred not to understand. His name is Leo. He's 17, and in his world he's famous. I pushed the door open. His room was dark, as always. The curtains were drawn tight against the afternoon sun, and the only light came from his 3 massive monitors. The air was thick with the smell of stale energy drinks and hot electronics. Leo was slick with sweat. He was leaning so close to the main screen that his nose almost touched it. On screen, a giant, glitching monster, all shifting polygons and chaotic light, raised a fist and smashed his character into red particles. The words "you died" flashed in center screen. "I can't," he screamed. He wasn't talking to me. He was talking to the 50,000 people listed in the corner of his screen. "He's been on this boss for 7 days," a robotic voice read out from his speakers. It was one of his fans. 7 days. The chat feed on the right monitor scrolled past, a waterfall of text I could barely read. Chatter 1. Rage quit in 3, 2, 1. Chatter 2. Thorn is gonna drop your sponsorship, Leo. Chatter 3. My grandma could play better than this. The Thorn logo was everywhere. It was stitched onto the back of his expensive ergonomic chair. It was printed on the jersey he wore. It was a flickering banner in the corner of his broadcast. "Thorn Interactive. The name tasted like ash. It's bugged," Leo yelled. He slammed both fists on his desk, making the keyboard and mouse jump. "The boss is literally bugged. It's impossible." He ripped his headset off and threw it. The heavy headphones hit the carpet with a dull thud. "I'm taking a break," he snarled at the screen. He shoved his chair back, the legs scraping hard on the floor mat. He stormed toward the door, his face tight with frustration. He pushed right past me, not even seeing the glass of water in my hand. The bedroom door slammed shut, and the frame rattled. I stood there in the sudden, vibrating silence. The only sounds left were the hum of the computer fan and the bleep-bloop of new donations. A robotic voice piped up again, reading a new message. "LOL, he's so mad." The game on the screen reset. The glitch-covered monster, the unbeaten, waited. 50,000 people were still watching. They were watching an empty chair. Then they were watching me. I walked over to the desk, placing the glass of water on a small coaster away from the tangle of wires. The mess was impressive. Empty aluminum cans, crumpled wrappers, and dust covered every surface that wasn't a screen. The robotic voice spoke again, reading a new message. "LOL, Grandma is here to clean up." I looked at the chat feed. It was moving so fast, but the words were clear. Chatter 2. "Don't unplug it, Grandma." Chatter 3. "She probably thinks the keyboard is a typewriter." Chatter 1. "Where did Leo go? Did he finally cry?" My eyes went back to the main screen, to the monster, the unbeaten. It paced back and forth, its body a chaotic mess of shifting code, just as the chat described. But it wasn't a bug. It was a loop, a very specific, very familiar loop. I leaned closer. The monster's left arm twitched, then its right. It was a pattern, a tiny flaw. I remembered sitting in a cold garage in 1984, my fingers stiff, coding that exact pattern. It was a signature. My signature. I had built this monster, and I had built its cage. The bedroom door burst open. Leo stood there, his face buried in his phone. "My agent is blowing me up, Grams," he said, not looking at me. "He says Thorne is... he..." Leo finally looked up. His eyes went from his phone to me, to the screen, to the active chat log. The color drained from his face. "Grams, what are you doing? The stream is on!" The chat instantly pivoted from mocking Leo to mocking me. Chatter 1 busted. Chatter 2. "Oh man, this is awkward. Get out of the..." "Wait, what are you doing?" Leo stammered. I didn't answer. I reached down and sat in his $1,000 ergonomic chair. It sighed under my weight. The synthetic mesh was cool against my back. My hands found the controller on the desk, still warm from his. I picked it up. The plastic felt light. Leo looked like he had seen a ghost. "Grams, no, stop," he whispered, but his microphone was sensitive. "It picked up everything. You can't, you're..." "God, you're embarrassing me." The chat absolutely exploded. The robotic voice couldn't keep up with the donations, creating a garbled mess of noise. Chatter, "She's gonna play." Chatter 2, "This is the best stream of the year." Chatter 3, "Leo's grandma versus the impossible boss." Chatter 4, "She's holding it upside down. LMAO, I wasn't." My thumb found the left stick. It felt natural. "Please, Grams," Leo begged. He was hiding his face with one hand, but I could see his eyes. He was genuinely in pain. "My life is over." I ignored him. I ignored the screaming chat and the donation alarms. I looked at the screen, at the monster I knew. I saw the words, "Press, start to continue." My thumb pressed the button. The game chimed. The monster roared. The fight was on. The controller vibrated hard in my hands. The unbeaten roared, a sound designed to terrify, and lunged. Its arm stretched, a mass of glitching polygons, filling the entire screen. The sound of a digital explosion filled the room. The chat spammed laughing emojis. I just moved. My thumb gently pushed the left stick. My character, a small knight in silver armor, took 2 precise steps to the left. The monster's giant fist smashed the stone floor right where I had been. Digital rocks flew past my knight's head. I was unharmed. A robotic voice read a new donation. "She's just standing there." $5. I could hear Leo breathing next to me. It was fast and shallow, a quick huff, huff, huff sound. "Grams, you have to attack," he hissed. He pointed a shaking finger at the controller. "Hit the X button! The X button!" I ignored him. The monster reared back. Its entire body began to glow with a blinding white light. This was its big move, the one that had killed Leo over and over. The chat knew it was coming. Chatter 1, GG, good game. Grandma. Chatter 2, she's dead. Chatter 3, F the beam fired. It was a solid wall of white energy that took up half the arena. I didn't roll. I didn't jump. I just walked. My thumb pushed the stick forward and to the right. My character walked calmly toward the beam, then moved alongside it. The edge of the attack passed so close it seemed to brush the knight's armor, but the health bar did not move, by a single pixel. No damage. The chat stopped laughing. The endless scroll of text slowed down. Chatter 1, okay WTF. Chatter 2, luck. Chatter 3, what just happened? Chatter 4, that's not possible. You're not even hitting it, Grams. Leo whispered. His voice was high, almost a squeak. You have to fight back. I don't need to, I said, my voice quiet. Not yet. I ignored the boss's next slow, clumsy swing. I turned my character and ran. Not toward the monster, but away from it. I ran to the back left corner of the arena. It was just a dark patch of stone, nothing special. No treasure, no glowing magic. Just a wall. Chatter 1, she's running away, LOL. Chatter 2, she's stuck in the corner. Grams, the corner? There's nothing there, Leo said, frantic. You're trapped. It's coming. I stopped. I faced the wall. My thumbs, stiff but sure, moved over the buttons. Block, block, jump, melee, jump. It was a simple rhythm, a pattern I had tapped out on a keyboard 40 years ago. Click, 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 click. A new sound came from the speakers. It was not the game's modern orchestral score. It was a thin, high-pitched electronic noise, a tiny 8-bit chime. It was a sound that did not belong in this game. On the screen, the impossible boss stopped. It just froze, mid-stride. The chaotic, glitchy aura around its body vanished. The monster looked solid, almost fake, and suddenly a long red health bar appeared above its head. It was almost empty. The chat feed on the right monitor stopped completely. It was a solid wall of text, unmoving. Leo's jaw was on the floor. His mouth was open, but no sound came out. "What?" he finally whispered. "What? What was that?" I finally looked away from the screen, just for a moment, to the small black microphone on Leo's desk. Its blue light was on. It was listening. "It's called the Vance sequence," I said. My voice was clear and steady. I turned my character back toward the frozen monster. "It's a developer failsafe," I explained. "I coded it in 1984. It was to debug the boss's event flags." I made my knight take a slow, deliberate step forward. Marcus was always too lazy to test the final build. So I left it in. Just in case, the chat slowly started to move. Chatter 1, Vance sequence. Chatter 2, Vance. Chatter 3, who is Marcus? I walked my knight right up to the monster that had tormented my grandson for a week. It stood as still as a statue. I raised my thumb. I pressed the X button. Once, my knight swung his sword in a simple, clean arc. The blade hit the monster's leg. The unbeaten shuddered. It didn't explode. It just dissolved into blue light. The music swelled. Bright golden words filled the screen. Victory. I set the controller down on the desk. The chat was a blur of questions. Leo just stared at me, his face pale. He looked like he didn't know who I was. The room was completely quiet for 3 full seconds. The only sound was the high-pitched whine of the computer's fan. Then the chat exploded. It was not a stream. It was a flood. A solid white block of text moving so fast it was impossible to read individual messages. The robotic voice started reading donations, one over the other, faster and faster, creating a jumbled, meaningless noise. Clip it now! What just happened?" She said, "Vance." A huge donation, $500, turned the whole screen green. The robotic voice yelled over the others, "Who is Vance?" I turned from the screen and looked at my grandson. He was still standing by the door, his hand on the wall. He was pale. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was looking at me. "Grams?" His voice was a dry whisper. The blue light on his desk microphone was still on. It heard every sound. "What did you just say?" he asked. His eyes were wide. "You said Vance, like our last name?" I nodded. I turned my head just enough to face the small dark circle of the camera lens. I was speaking to Leo, but I was also speaking to the 50,000 people listening. "Yes, Leo, Vance, like our name." I pointed a finger at the screen, where the game Etheria's Vengeance was now rolling its credits. This game, this remake, it's based on an old game from 1984. The original was called Etheria's Curse. Leo shook his head slowly, trying to understand. "But my partner and I built it," I said. "In our garage, on a computer you've only seen in pictures. His name was Marcus." I let the name sit in the air. "Marcus Thorne." Leo's reaction was slow. His eyes moved from my face to the screen, and then down to his own chest. His hand came up, and his fingers touched the colorful, stitched logo on his jersey. "Thorne?" he whispered. He pointed at the logo. "Thorne. Interactive?" His gaze darted around the room, as if he were seeing it for the first time. He saw the Thorne Interactive posters on his wall. He saw the Thorne Interactive logo printed on his chair. He saw the Thorn Interactive sponsorship links that were, at that very second, scrolling under my face on the broadcast. "Yes," I said. "That Thorn, but—" "He's the CEO," Leo stammered. He's a legend. He founded the company?" "He founded it with me," I said. My voice was suddenly cold. It had been 40 years, but the anger was still there, hard and sharp. He pushed me out. 1 week before we signed the contract with the publisher, he took my code, all of it. He filed the patents under his name, only his. He told the magazines I was just his secretary, someone who got his coffee. I looked back at the screen. The new credits were rolling past, hundreds of names. At the very bottom, a line of text appeared, based on the original 1984 classic by Marcus Thorne. My name was nowhere. "He built this," I said. I waved my hand at Leo's expensive setup, at the posters, at the game. This whole empire. He built it all on my work. He just wasn't a good enough programmer to find all my back doors. Leo didn't speak. He just slid down the wall. He hit the floor with a soft thump and sat there, his legs sprawled out. The bright, cruel mockery he had felt earlier was gone. This was something else. This wasn't embarrassment. This was shame. He had built his entire career taking money from and praising the man who had stolen his family's legacy. "Grams," he said, and his voice cracked. I didn't know." The chat was chaos. Chatter 1. Thorne stole the game. Chatter 2. Eleanor Vance. Chatter 3. Leo's grandma invented Thorne Interactive. Chatter 4. Marcus Thorne is a frauda new sound cut through the noise. It wasn't the game. It wasn't the chat. It was Leo's phone vibrating on the desk. It buzzed loud and hard, skittering across the wood. The screen lit up. The caller ID was simple: Thorne, agent. Leo stared at the phone. He flinched when it buzzed again. He looked at me, his face a mask of pure panic. Leo's phone continued to buzz on the desk. The sound was violent in the suddenly tense room. The name Thorne, agent, glowed on the screen. Leo didn't move. He just stared at the vibrating plastic. The chat was still scrolling, a torrent of digital support and outrage. Chatter 1. "Sue him, Grandma." Chatter 2. "Leo, you have to help her." Chatter 3. Vance was robbed. Leo's eyes lifted from the phone to me. His face was a mess of shame and a new, slow-burning anger. He wasn't a famous streamer anymore. He was just a boy who had learned a terrible secret. He pushed himself up from the floor. He walked to the desk past me. He didn't look at his agent's call. He looked at the camera, at the 50,000 people watching his family's private history unfold. His hand went to the mouse. He clicked a button. The screen that showed his face went black. The stream ended. The room plunged into an immediate heavy silence. The 3 monitors switched to his desktop background. The chat was gone. The donation alerts stopped. The only sounds were the computer's quiet hum and the buzz, buzz, buzz of the phone, which suddenly seemed 10 times louder. Leo finally looked at the phone. He reached out and jabbed his finger at the decline icon. The buzzing stopped. "Grams," he said. His voice was raw. Is all of that true?" "Every word," I said. Before he could speak again, the phone lit up with a text. Then another, and another. A constant stream of notifications started pouring in. His phone chimed, buzzed, chimed, buzzed. "It's not just my agent," he said, his voice numb. He picked it up. His thumb scrolled. "It's everyone." He turned the screen to me. It was a news alert from a major gaming website. The headline was simple: "Programmer Grandma destroys impossible boss and CEO's legacy in 2 minutes." My old tablet, which I'd left on the kitchen counter downstairs, started to chime. A news alert, then a phone call. The sound was faint, but it was there. The clip was already out. It was everywhere. I slept on the couch that night. Leo never came out of his room. I don't think either of us slept. The next morning, I was in the kitchen, waiting for the coffee to brew. The house was quiet, but the world was not. Through the open window, I could hear my neighbor's phone ringing. Leo came downstairs. His eyes were red. He wore a different shirt, a plain gray one, no logos. He held his phone in his hand like it was a weapon. "It's bad, Gramps," he said. He sat down at the small kitchen table. "Thorn Interactive stock. It's down 30% in pre-market trading." He slid the phone across the table to me. I didn't need my glasses to see the headline. It was from a major financial news network. "They're calling it the Vance sequence discovery," he said. "Gaming historians they're confirming it. They're digging up old articles from 1984. They found your name in the code of other old Byteforge games." He took a shaky breath. He released a statement. An hour ago, he tapped the screen and a new article appeared. It was an official press release from Thorn Interactive. I read the first line. "Marcus Thorn denies the baseless claims." Leo read the rest of it for me, his voice flat and dead. "A spokesperson for Mr. Thorn calls the allegations senile fiction from a disgruntled former employee. The statement claims you were a junior coder let go for performance issues and are now lashing out for money and attention." He looked up from the screen, his face hardening. "He called you senile. He called you a liar." I picked up my mug. The coffee was black and hot. I took a sip. "Disgruntled," I said. He always liked that word. He used it when he fired our quality tester for finding a bug he couldn't fix. I set the mug down. Marcus was predictable. He was arrogant. He thought I was just an old woman with a fading memory. He forgot what I really was. "He's forgotten something important, Leo," I said. "He thinks the past is just a story. He forgets that I'm a programmer. The code is the proof. The code is always the proof." I looked him in the eye. "Turn your stream back on." Leo's room felt different. It was cold. We had the window open, and the morning air was sharp. He didn't turn on his colorful intro music. He didn't play his Leo the Lion roar. He just sat down, opened the broadcast software, and clicked the Go Live button. The screen flickered. We were live. I watched the viewer count in the corner of the screen. Yesterday, he had 50,000. The number that appeared now was 100,000. It jumped to 120,000. It kept climbing, finally settling at 150,000. 150,000 people, all silent, all watching an empty title card Leo. Wearing his plain gray shirt, pulled his chair up. I sat in a spare chair beside him, fully in the camera's view. He cleared his throat. "I have an apology to make," he said. His voice was steady. "I was sponsored by a man who I didn't understand, and I have an introduction." He gestured to me. I leaned forward toward the small, blue-lit microphone. "Good morning," I said. "My name is Eleanor Vance." The chat feed, which had been quiet, started to move. "Yesterday," I continued, "Mr. Marcus Thorn, the CEO of Thorn Interactive, responded to my appearance. He called me senile. He said my claims were fiction. He called me a liar." I saw the anger building in the chat. Chatter 1, "He's the liar." Chatter, "We believe you, Eleanor." "Mr. Thorn is counting on the fact that 40 years is a long time," I said. "He is counting on me having no proof. He thinks the past is just a story. He has forgotten that I am a programmer, and programmers always sign their work." I turned to my grandson. "Leo, close the game. Please, load up the original 1984 source code for Etheria's Curse, the one the remake was built on." Leo's fingers were fast. The game vanished. A new program opened. It was a black screen filled with lines and lines of glowing green text. It was old code, a language almost no one living could read. Chatter 1, "What is this?" Chatter 2, "I don't understand." Chatter 3, "It's just a mess of text." "This," I said, pointing to the screen, is the game. The original, not the pretty graphics. This is the heart. This is the code I wrote. I looked at Leo. Now please find the file for the credit scroll. The official one. He typed a command. A new block of text appeared. It was a short, simple list. Design, Marcus Thorne Programming, Marcus Thorne Special. Thanks, MT. This is the list Mr. Thorne showed the publisher, I said. This is what the world has seen for 40 years. The chat feed was a stream of angry faces. He was very thorough, I said. But not thorough enough, I leaned in. Now, Leo, on this screen, right here, I pointed to the list of names. Run the Vance sequence. The same code as yesterday. Block, block, jump, melee, jump. Leo's eyes met mine. He understood. He wasn't just pressing buttons. He was turning a key. His fingers typed the sequence. For a second, nothing happened. The green text just flickered. Then the screen glitched. The official credits dissolved, as if they were sand. They were replaced. A hidden file, buried for 4 decades, had been forced open. It was just 2 lines of plain, simple text. I leaned into the microphone. I read the first line aloud. Lead design and all core programming, Eleanor Vance. The chat stopped. It didn't slow down. It stopped. The entire feed froze, as if 150,000 people had all held their breath at the exact same moment. I let the silence hang in the air. Then I read the second line. Thanks for the coffee and marketing, Marcus Thorne. The stream broke. The chat feed vanished, replaced by a spinning error symbol. The viewer count disappeared. We had overloaded the servers. Leo was staring at the 2 lines of text. He was completely white. His phone, which he had set to silent on the desk, lit up. It wasn't a call. It was a text message, then another, then a flood of them. One message stayed on the top of the screen. It wasn't from his agent. It was from the top journalist at the Gaming News Network. Leo picked up the phone. He read the message out loud, his voice empty. We just received an emergency push alert from Thorne Interactive's primary investors. The board is convening an emergency meeting. In 10 minutes. The internet did not just break. It tore itself apart and rebuilt itself around a new story. Our story. Before our stream even ended, the first news alerts hit. Thorne Interactive servers overloaded by Vance sequence revelation. An hour later, the real news came. Leo read the alert out loud from his phone, his voice quiet. The board of directors of Thorne Interactive, he read, has voted unanimously to terminate the employment of CEO Marcus Thorne, effective immediately. He just stared at his phone. He's gone, Grams, just like that. 40 years. And it took you 1 afternoon. I watched the digital headline. It wasn't just an afternoon. It was 40 years and 1 afternoon. We went quiet for a week. We unplugged the phones. We ignored the reporters who camped out on the lawn. We just talked. For the first time, Leo asked me about my life. About the garage. About the code. About the partner who had become a billionaire. And the partner who had become a grandmother. I told him everything. Then, 1 week after the unbeaten was beaten, Leo sat down at his desk again. I sat beside him. The room was clean. The posters were gone. The curtains were open, and warm sunlight streamed in, lighting up the dust motes. Leo was wearing a new shirt. It was black, with a small 8-bit sprite of a knight on the chest. He clicked Go Live. The viewer count shot up. 200,000. 300,000. It settled at almost 500,000 people all waiting. All right, chat, Leo said. He sounded different, calmer. New setup. As you can see, some sponsors have changed. He smiled, a real smile. In fact, I have a new sponsor I'd like to announce. They're a startup, very exclusive. He turned and looked at me. Today, I am happy to announce the launch of Vance Legacy Games, he said, his voice full of a pride I had never heard from him before. It's my grandma's new consulting company. The chat, which had been waiting, exploded. This time it wasn't shock or anger. It was joy. The donation alerts were deafening. I leaned into the microphone. "Thank you for the support," I said. "We've been very busy this week. Vance Legacy Games has already signed its first client." Leo looked at me, pretending to be surprised. "Oh, really? Who is it?" "The new board of Thorn Interactive," I said. The chat went wild again. "They've hired me," I continued, "to conduct a full audit of their original code. I'm to find and fix all the bugs and bad code Marcus left in for the last 40 years. I paused. "And I will be adding my name to the box of every copy of Etheria's Vengeance." A massive donation, $1,000, filled the screen. The robotic voice was respectful. "Eleanor is the queen. Leo is just the court jester. We love you, Grandma." I looked at Leo. He was reading the message. A week ago, he would have been furious. He would have felt embarrassed. Now, he just laughed. It was a real deep laugh. He shook his head, his eyes shining. "It's true, chat. She's the queen. I'm just happy to be in the court." He turned off the donation alerts and the chat overlay, leaving just his face and mine on the screen. The room was quiet. "So," he said, picking up his controller. He held it out to me. "Our first consulting session. You want to teach me how to actually play this game, Grams?" I smiled. I took the controller. "All right, Leo," I said. "Pay attention. It all starts with the first move.